Okay, guys, there are a couple of things that we should remember about list. And we're going to start by how to add elements to a list. It's very simple. The easiest way to add elements on a list is using append. Append just adds an element at the last position of the index. Now remember, the list that we are going to create has starts in the index number 0 or position 0. So every time that you add an element, it will go to the next position. So let's try to add some elements to this list. I'm going to start with a cat. Now cat is in position 0. Then the snake. Snake is in position 1. Bird in position 2. Dog in position 3. Fish in position 4, and horse in position 5. Now, as we can see, we have a list now with elements, and that we have a list of size 6. Now, this list, it is important that you understand that the size is different from the index or the last index. Okay, so that is very important. So we have a size 6, and we have an index, and the last index is 5. This is really important because when we make reference to an index or an element in the list, we have to use the indexes. But when we make reference to the length or to the size of the list, is the number of elements that can be stored in it. So how would we do this in Thunkable or in any application that we have been using? Let's go to Thunkable and let's start with understanding that a list is a variable, okay? It's a variable or an object that contains many elements of a certain variable. So I'm going to start initializing a variable that is going to be my to-do list, because what we're going to do in this app is create a to-do list. That way we know things that we have to do every day, and then we can cross them out when we're done. So we're going to initialize a variable called to-do list, and this variable I'm going to create an empty list. Remember when we created double quotations just to understand that a string variable was empty? Well, here we're going to do an empty list, so you know that we are going to start adding some elements. Now if I go to the design tab, what I did is I created a couple of elements on my design. One of them was a text input. That way I can start putting what is my to-do list. I have a button that is going to be submit, so I can list all the things. And then I have a list viewer where I'm going to see where my elements are. Okay, I'm going to go back to the block diagram, and I'm going to check and see what happens when I press the button. And I'm going to explain it right here. So when button 1 clicks, this is what I'm going to do. In list, and I'm going to choose my to-do list. In this list, I'm going to insert at the last position, and that's the way we append different elements in a list. Insert it at last position as from the text input get text. Okay, so what I'm going to do is that from the text, I am going to add to my list the last position. Okay. Then the following steps in order to see those elements in the list viewer is that from the list viewer option pane, I click on the list viewer, I'm going to click from the list viewer, I am going to set the text items to the variable to-do list. So this is exactly what I'm doing. So on the list viewer, I am going to set the items from the to-do list. Then I will make that list viewer visible to true. That way I can see the elements. So let's look at it really quick and see the design. I'm going to click on preview, and let's say my to-do list is going to have a couple of things that I have to do during the day, or during the. Okay, so I'm going to type here whatever I have to do. So I have to walk the dog. I have to maybe do my homework, and then I have to call my grandma, and then I have to make sure that I feed the fish. Okay, so I have a to-do list, and as soon as I click on submit, what I'm doing is that I'm appending each of these elements, which are strings basically, into my list. So I have walk the dog, do my homework, call my grandma, and feed the fish. Now remember, in this case, I would have walk the dog at position 0, which is index 0. I have do my homework at position 1, call my grandma at position 2, and feed the fish at position 3. So it's a list of 4 elements with the last index at 3. Okay, now in Thunkable, we are going to see a small difference when we talk about the indexes of the elements, okay? In every single programming language, indexes of the elements of a list start at 0. In Thunkable, we make reference to starting at 1. This is just something that the programming language of Thunkable has. So let's create a label, and we're going to verify this. We're going to add a label right here to my design, and I'm going to put this label at the bottom underneath the list viewer. So I'm going to create the label here, and I'm going to see what index relates to each of the elements that I have. So I'm going to click on the block diagram, and what I'm going to do is that when I click the item from the list viewer, and I'm going to show you how I got this. This is very simple. So on the list viewer, when the item clicks, I am going to modify the label that I just created. So from the label, set text to the index, and that way I'm going to see the index that the element is on. So I'm going to go back to the design, I'm going to click on preview, and I'm going to see what happens. So I'm going to put the list that I was using on my example, where I have cat, snake, bird, dog. So I'm going to put cat, snake, bird, dog. I also have fish and horse, and I have the list that I was creating, okay? So in every single programming language, cat will be in index 0, snake in index 1, and so on and so forth. Now what I see in Thunkable is when I click on cat, I can see the index 1, snake on index 2, bird on index 3, dog on index 4, fish on index 5, and horse on index 6. So the only difference is that in Thunkable, indexes start at 1, and in every other operating programming language, they start at 0. This is very important, okay? Okay, now instead of using the label that we created for when I click on the element, see the index of that element, what I'm going to do is that I am going to use that label in a function of update screen so I can see the size of the list all the time. Okay, so what I'm going to do is that let's review a little bit functions, and let's create a function that is called update screen, so the screen is always updated with the new size of the list. Okay, so in update screen, what I'm going to do is that from label, I am going to set the text label to the size of my list. Now, where do I see the size or the length of that list? I'm going to click on list, and from list, okay, I can click on length of, and length of what? Remember that the list that I have is just a variable. So I'm going to go to my list, which is the to-do list variable, and here I am going to see the element. So every time that I add a new element, I am going to see the size of the list on that label. Okay? Now, another thing we're going to do is that we are going to remove elements from a list. Remember that when I delete an element from a list, two things are going to change. Now, the size of the list is going to change, and the index of all the elements after that element are going to change. So for example, if I remove bird from the list, then remember that dog will take its place, fish will shift to the left, and horse will move to the left. And then all of a sudden, the list that had 6 elements now has 5 elements, okay? So remember that. That is very important, okay? So exactly what we're going to do is that we're going to create a condition that when I click on the element or the item, I am going to remove the element. And I'm also going to use the update screen to see what's going on. Okay, so What I'm missing is that when I add a button, I need to update the screen, okay? And then when I click the item, I will also update the screen. So when I click the item, I'm gonna go to list and I have an option that is called remove, okay? So in list, which list? The app variable to-do list. So the to-do list, from the list to-do list, I am going to remove number, and what should go here? The index of that item that I clicked. Okay, so let's see how it works. Oh, remember, we need to update the screen because that is the function that I will be using every time that I add or remove an item from the list. So I'm going to go to design and let's see how it works. I'm going to put in the animals again. So I'm going to put cat, then dog, then fish, then snake. I don't know if it's the same order, but the animals are there. I have horse and I have bird. Okay, so I have my elements right here, and as I can see, the label is updated nicely. So I have 6 elements. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is the size or the length of the list. And when I click on one of these elements, the list should resize automatically. If I click on horse, then bird take its place, right? And the size, it's 5. Now if I take away cat, then dog, fish, snake, and bird should shift up and take one place further. And I see the size of the list right here. So there are so many things that we can do with lists. Now we just created a to-do list that we can start and add and remove elements as we need. So this is really helpful.